What's up, Philly Sports Network? Welcome into a brand new podcast exclusively for your listening pleasure. I'm your host, Tyler Zulli. We don't have a name just yet, and that's the beauty of this show is it's still to be determined. But for now, we'll just call it the Philly Sports Network Podcast. But we do want to get your feedback on what this podcast should be. We'll talk about all things Philadelphia sports, from the Eagles to the Flyers, Sixers, Phillies, maybe get into some college talk as well if time really permits it. So let me get some feedback on what you guys want this podcast to be named. I've got a lot of great ideas so far, but it's all about you guys. Give me some love, give me some feedback, and tell me exactly what you want this podcast to be. It'll be once a week, only on Philly Sports Network. We'll go somewhere between a half an hour and an hour, depending on how things progress throughout the seasons. The Eagles obviously coming to an end very shortly, but the Flyers and Sixers midway through their seasons. The Phillies about to ramp up in about 2 months' time when they go down to Clearwater for spring training. We'll bring in some guests. We'll talk to experts as this show progresses as well. But from right now, it'll just be me for the next 30 minutes to an hour, and we'll get things kicked off right away because the Philadelphia Eagles have kind of a big game coming up. I don't know if you know that or not, but there's kind of a big deal in Philadelphia this weekend. Sunday, 6:40, going to be on Fox. It'll be the Philadelphia Eagles and the Minnesota Vikings, as you could have guessed, with a right to go to the Super Bowl on the line, Super Bowl 52. Now, before we get into the game and we get into the schematics and the X factors and what the Eagles need to do to win, how they need to prevent Minnesota and what they need to prevent Minnesota from doing in order to not lose the game, the first thing that I want to get to, it's been on my mind all week now, and I think it's been on a lot of fans in Philadelphia's mind as well. Talked about it on sports radio all across Philadelphia all week. It's been the back and forth, or really the one-sided nature of a relationship between Philadelphia sports radio and Minnesota sports radio, where Minnesota sports radio is feeding in Philadelphia sports radio host and talk show host to get their opinion, or not even to get their opinion because they're not asking them questions. It's not an interview. They're simply bringing these talk show hosts on through syndication or whatever means they have, listening to what they say, and then basically ripping Philadelphia talk show hosts for their outtake and their outlook on the game. Now, I'm sure as you've all heard over the last couple of days, Minnesota media, it's not even just sports talk shows, but Minnesota media has talked about how Philadelphia fans are ruthless and how we in Philadelphia are quote-unquote gang members. We were called gang members, folks. Gang members by people up in Minnesota, saying that Philadelphia fans are rabid. You're going to die if you come to Philadelphia and you wear your Case Keenum jersey or you wear your Adam Thielen jersey. You're going to die. That's what they're saying to the people in Minnesota. Minnesota is offering same-day round-trip flights for something along the lines of like $800 so that you don't have to stay in Philadelphia overnight. And you don't have to be in this city, especially if the Vikings were to beat the Eagles. Basically what they're saying is get in, go watch the game, and get back to Minnesota before somebody stabs you. And that's the mantra that is being forced down these Vikings fans' throats, that we here in Philadelphia are just total scumbags. We're the worst people ever. And I want to prove that one wrong. But also, I kind of at the same time, I want to feed that fire a little bit. I don't want people to die. Don't get me wrong. I don't want Philadelphians going up to Minnesota Vikings fans and harassing them or punching them in the face or doing anything that's stupid that's going to get you in trouble and actually make us look like bad people. But here is my caveat to that statement. Minnesota is saying that we are a city of bravado and a city of false bravado because we as Philadelphians hype up our teams without winning very much. Obviously, the Flyers with just 2 Stanley Cups back in the 70s. The Phillies with 2 World Series in 120-plus years of existence. The Sixers haven't won since the 80s. The Eagles have never won a Super Bowl. But the thing is, we understand that. And we are some of the harshest critics to our own teams that one could imagine. I've never been harder on a team, on a football team especially, than I am on the Philadelphia Eagles. I am harder on the Eagles than I am on Penn State football, than I am on, my video game football, than I am on myself. I'm harder on the Eagles because it's my way of getting in the game. But I'll get back to that in a second. Minnesota Vikings fans, or Minnesota media, is saying that don't go and drink and don't go and get inebriated because we will be. We as Philadelphia fans will be inebriated. Let me ask you something, Minnesota fans, and let me ask you something, Philadelphia fans, because I think you have a right head on this, because you understand that all fans of all teams, when the game is on the line, especially a chance to go to the NFC title game, is more than just going and watching your team. This is not 1950 anymore. We're not going in suits and ties and sitting on our hands and golf clapping, politely clapping. Oh, yes, the Eagles scored a touchdown. Congratulations. We're not doing that anymore. It's 2018, and the understanding of fandom is that you're going to go for a 640 kick with a chance to go to the Super Bowl on the line to watch your team compete in Super Bowl 52 for a 640 kick. You're probably going to show up at a minimum noon, 2. And if you show up at 2, you're not getting a parking spot in Lincoln Financial Fields lot. You're not getting a spot in Jetro. You may not get a spot in Citizens Bank Park's lot because people are going to be there at 10 a.m. for this 6 o'clock kick. Yes, that's 9 hours, nearly 9 hours before kickoff. But that is what Philadelphia fans are going to do. And so what I'm going to say to Philadelphia fans is, with an understanding to not do anything illegal or stupid, here's what I'm going to tell you. They want inebriated fans? Show them inebriated fans. Show them drunken passion. Don't be stupid and don't get in fights with the guy wearing his Adam Thielen jersey who stands up when he scores a touchdown or when the Vikings do something that progresses their team's chances at winning the football game. Don't get in a fight with that guy. But be loud, be proud, get in people's faces without being the aggressor to the point where you're going to get arrested. Do something for your football team, for the Philadelphia Eagles, that is going to make an impact. And that's be loud and be proud, and be loud from opening kick to the final whistle. Show up, support your Eagles, and do something that this team needs, and that's get behind them. And like I said, if they want drunken fans, give them drunken fans. Give them a reason to never want to come back to Philadelphia, and not in an illegal way. Give them a reason and show to them, say, this is Philadelphia, this is Lincoln Financial Field, these are our Eagles. I'm not a fan of saying us, we are, when I talk about a football team, because I'm not employed by the Eagles. I have no affiliation with the Eagles other than I work for a site that writes about the Eagles. I work in Philadelphia media that speaks about the Eagles, and I have an Eagles fandom. But you can say our team because there is a passion about our team. You can't say we need to win the game to go to the Super Bowl because you have no impact on the game on the field. You have an impact in the stands, obviously, but you don't have an impact on the field. But you can say our team. And when it comes to your football team, your Philadelphia Eagles, you need to go in and get loud and get rowdy, especially on big-time plays. Third down when the Vikings have the football. First down when the Vikings have the football. Heck, you know what? Second down when the Vikings have the football. And fourth down when their punter comes out onto the field to try to punt. Get loud and do not allow Case Keenum, who, by the way, doesn't make a lot of mistakes. And we'll get on Case Keenum and statistics a little bit later, but I wanted to get the passion out first. You can talk about stats and meaningful statistical outcomes to a game that will make this game what it is. And at the end of the day, the game is going to be won and lost on the field with statistics. But as football fans, your passion is what drives you. And that's why I wanted to start this very first podcast for Philly Sports Network with the passion side. And like I said, as I close this first segment up and we go to our first break, if they want inebriation, give them inebriation. If they want drunken Eagles fans, give them drunken Eagles fans. If they want cursing Eagles fans, give them cursing Eagles fans. Because nobody is going to change the mindset of Philadelphia. The mindset of Philadelphia was made up a long time ago by everybody else. We know what we are as fans. They've got some kind of delusion when the 1 in every 100 causes an issue that 100 out of 100 are terrible human beings. When in reality, 99 of the 100 of us that are at that game go to work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, or whatever you work, come home, have a couple beers on the weekends, go support your Eagles on Sunday. Blue-collar American people. That's what Philadelphia sports fans are. But there is a deception about Philadelphia that we are just the worst human beings on the planet. And like I said 100 times today, and I'm going to wrap up with it one more time, they want animals? Show them animals. Have fun at the game on Sunday, everybody, if you're going down. Enjoy responsibly. We're going to hit a commercial break, or a real quick break. No real commercials, but a break. On the other side, we're going to actually dive into the statistics of things. And then finally, we'll wrap the show up with a little bit of Sixers talk, as they are officially midway through the 2017-18 NBA season. Thanks for tuning into the Philly Sports Podcast that hasn't been named just yet, but we will get a name for it as the weeks progress. We'll head to a break. We'll see you on the other side. Like I said right before we headed to break, this game is going to be determined on the field. And while you have that great impact in the stands, getting loud on 3rd and 4th down, this game will be determined and won and lost on the field. And that's just how it is. Welcome back into the No Name Podcast for Philly Sports Network right now. We'll get a name as we get things going, as the coming weeks progress and we get further into this podcast. But for now, we'll just call it the No Name Podcast. I'm Tyler Zulli. I'm your host each and every week, and let's dive into this game a little bit. The Eagles and the Vikings, the 1 seed versus the 2 seed, the two best teams in the NFC all year long. The Eagles out of the NFC East, the Vikings out of the NFC North, both with substantial victories week in and week out. The Eagles win 13 games to get to this point. Obviously on the shoulders of Carson Wentz and a great defense. Well, now it's down to Nick Foles and a great defense. And Nicky 6 games, by the way. The man that we have very lovingly donned Nicky 6 games is now Nicky 2 games. That's right, folks. 120 minutes of football stand in front of Nick Foles, the Philadelphia Eagles, and the franchise's first Super Bowl title since the Super Bowl's inception 52 years ago. Now, obviously, we know the Eagles have played in the Super Bowl twice. In my lifetime alone, the Eagles are now in their 6th NFC title game. Think about that. I'm 24 years old. I just turned 24. So in 24 years on this planet, the Philadelphia Eagles will play in 6 title games. That's a quarter of my lifetime. I can't have 5 losses. I just can't. It's going to hurt me too much physically to have a 5th loss under that belt, or under my belt. But let's dive into some statistics here. Really the big talking point for the Eagles and the Vikings, who, if you look at them just on paper, if you look at them statistically, if you look at their rosters, these two teams are eerily similar. Obviously, we know the situation with two guys that were backup quarterbacks to begin the year were cast out of St. Louis by Jeff Fisher, who, by the way, is the worst coach in the history of football. I don't care that he took the Titans to one Super Bowl appearance. If it wasn't for the Music City Miracle, they would have never played in that game. The Buffalo Bills would have beaten the Titans, and Jeff Fisher would be widely known as the worst coach in NFL history. But because he got to one Super Bowl, people gave him a pass, and Mr. 7-9, and that's the worst place to be in sports. But enough of that. We could have a whole show on that. Just understand my thought process is that Jeff Fisher is the worst coach in the history of the NFL. Let's get to some statistics about these two defenses, because that's really where it boils down. I've heard a lot of predictions, and I'll give my prediction at the end of this segment before we get to some Sixers talk to wrap things up. But I've heard a lot of predictions over the last week. Since the Vikings had the Minneapolis Miracle, the Stephon Diggs play, Marcus Williams fell down, and they've made 9 million gifs about him since the Sunday night affair, which is unbelievable in a 5-day span. But statistically speaking, these two teams are eerily similar. The Minnesota Vikings score about 24 points a game. That's good for 10th in the league. The Eagles a tick more at 28.6. That's the third most points scored in the NFL. But, of course, you have to remember a lot of those games, the number was much higher and predicated on the play of Carson Wentz. You've got a 0, I should say, in the final week of the season against the Dallas Cowboys. Teen points, get points in the teens against the Oakland Raiders. So that number has dipped a little bit. They were in the top 2 earlier in the season, but that number is what it is. 28 points a game is still a pretty good number by any means necessary. But the defenses is where it's really at. The Minnesota Vikings, in terms of points allowed per game, the best defense in the NFL. They give up 15.8 points a game, which means they're not even giving up 2 touchdowns and a field goal. You're not scoring 3 times on the Minnesota Vikings. On the flip side, the Eagles have been equally impressive. They give up about 18 points a game, which is good for 4th most in the NFL. You've got 2 teams, in fact, that have really aggressive front fours that don't blitz a ton with more than their front four because they get home. On the one side, you've got the Minnesota Vikings, who are led by Everson Griffith, who is an animal on the front four. I mean, there's not much to say about that guy other than he is a physically imposing defensive lineman who is going to cause problems for Vaitai on the left side. Just be ready for a sack or 2 given up on the side that Vaitai swings around. It's just going to happen with how good Griffin is. On the flip side, you've got an Eagles front four that rotates about 6 guys in and out that are all just as effective. And the sum is greater than the parts. While, yes, you have a $100 million man in Fletcher Cox, he's a Pro Bowler year in and year out. Brandon Graham's really come into his own as a D-end. While he may never get over the stipulation of not being Earl Thomas, he's become a much better defensive end and a pass rusher over the last few seasons. But regardless of how good individually these guys have become, the sum of their parts is what the sum of the whole, I should say, is greater than the parts. It's what makes them such a ferocious front four and why they get to the quarterback so many times in the span of a 16-game season and now in one playoff game against the Atlanta Falcons, which they held a high-flying Atlanta Falcons offense to 10 points. Matt Ryan, the reigning MVP, obviously will not be the MVP of 2018, but the reigning MVP, the reigning NFC champions, a team that went on the road and defeated the Los Angeles Rams, handily, by the way, was held to 10 points in Philadelphia. The Eagles' defense at home is a different animal. They are good on the road. They are nearly untouchable at home. Let me throw some numbers out at you, and then we'll kind of put them all into perspective. The Eagles in Lincoln Financial Field, now playing 9 games in Lincoln Financial Field, including the game against the Atlanta Falcons last week, have yet to allow a rushing touchdown in 9 games. Let that sink in. No touchdowns over a 9-game period. They've allowed 564 rushing yards in that same time frame and 3.3 yards per carry. The run game has been non-existent when you come into Philly. And I understand that some of the teams that they played while in Philadelphia didn't have prolific run games. Carlos Hyde is not as good as many had hoped he would be for the 49ers. You have the Broncos running game, which is mix and match, in and out. C.J. Anderson's good. He's not great. I get that they haven't played. They got the Washington Redskins at home once, who really utilized Chris Thompson in the pass game but don't run the ball effectively. They got the Giants once, who Orleans Darkwa started to kind of establish himself as the starting back towards the end of the season, but they're not world beaters by any means. I get the fact that the Eagles played a third-place schedule or a fourth-place schedule, but that does not limit the understanding. It does not crush the statistical importance that the Eagles' front seven has done to opposing running games all season long. 564 yards in 9 games. That's unbelievable. That's absolutely mind-bogglingly unbelievable. And where the Eagles really thrive is in that first down, not allowing rushing yards on first down. That parlays into a second and long, which again parlays into a third and long. The Eagles do a tremendous job of putting teams in third and unmanageable. You always hear that term, second and manageable, third and manageable. Well, what exactly is manageable to you? To me, manageable on second down is 7, and on third down is 4. And if that's your kind of understanding and control of manageable as well, then you're going to like this stat. The Eagles don't allow teams to have third and manageable. Teams averaging at home, well, I should say on the road, while the Eagles are home, average their third down at about 7.8 yards per play. And what I mean by that is every time the Eagles are against the third down with their defense on the field, so the opposing offense is in third and whatever, the Eagles are holding opposing offenses to approximately third and 8. You can't run the football on third and 8. You could run a draw, but the Eagles' defense is good against the run, and especially against the draw, because the front four pin their ears back and get after the quarterback, and they collapse the pocket. And you're not going to be able to slip a running back out of the pocket in order to get into the second level when you run the draw. So now you are nearly telegraphing, that you're going to throw the football on third down. Does that mean anything to the Vikings? Sure, I think it does. Because the Vikings are extremely good on third and short. Third and short, which you would consider 4 yards or less, which again, you would consider manageable for third down. The Vikings average nearly 8 yards a play. Why? Because they can do both. They can give the ball to Latavius Murray out of the backfield. They could swing it out to Jerick McKinnon in the flat. They could throw the ball to Kyle Rudolph right in the middle of the field. You could hit the seam with Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs. They have weapons. And on third and short, you can utilize run. You can utilize pass. You can utilize play action. But on third and long, you can't do those things. You can't run the ball on third and 8 unless you have a stud running back like Le'Veon Bell. You cannot run a draw against the Eagles on third and 8. It just doesn't happen. So the Eagles are going to need to keep the Minnesota Vikings at further than third and manageable. Further than third and 5. Keep them in third and 6. Keep them in third and 8. And the key to that is first and second down. Stop the run on first down. The Vikings throw the ball more and more as downs progress. As you would imagine, most NFL teams do. But the parity between first down and second and third down when it comes to running the football for the Minnesota Vikings is incredible. It's staunch. The difference between first down for the Vikings running the ball and running the ball on second and third down is a huge, huge difference. So if you can keep the Vikings in second and long and third and long situations, it's going to force Case Keenum to make plays. Like I said earlier, Case Keenum doesn't make a lot of mistakes. The team as a whole threw 8 interceptions this entire season. And that includes Sam Bradford's first couple of games in the regular season as the starting quarterback. But you have to be able to keep the Vikings in third and long, especially in the middle of the field. If you keep the Vikings in third and long in the middle of the field, particularly from their 20 to midfield, they're prone to turn the football over. 5 of the team's 8 interceptions this year have come from their 21-yard line to midfield. And 3 of those 5 have come on third down. If you keep the Vikings in third and long and get your defense off the field, one of the best third down defenses in the NFL this season, mind you, the Eagles have a very, very legitimate shot. Second down is key. First down's key to stop the run because the Vikings like to run a lot on first down. But second down is of the utmost importance because the Vikings, through the air, are the most effective on second down. Now, I'm not going to bore you with statistics, and I've thrown a lot at you over the last 15 minutes, but here's one more for you for the Vikings offense. On second down, quarterback's passer ratings, which basically means Case Keenum's passer ratings, because you can, while Sam Bradford's numbers are in the mix, it's been Case Keenum all year. Case Keenum's numbers and Vikings quarterback's numbers, they've got a 111.6 passer rating on second down. That number's in the 80s on first down, in the 60s on third down. Over 110 on second down, which is why second down is going to be the most crucial down for the Eagles to get at Case Keenum. Fluster Case Keenum like he's never been flustered before. This is a guy that used to throw 50-plus times a game at Houston. Therefore, when you throw the ball that much, opposing defenses blitz 4, maybe 5, but they drop guys back in coverage. When you have an air raid attack like that in college football, defensive coordinators are afraid to bring the heat. In the NFL, that's not the case. And I know that Jim Johnson. Rest in peace, Jim Johnson. I know that Jim Schwartz doesn't like to bring a lot of pressure, especially on second and third down. But that should be of no consequence to this Eagles, especially the front 4, to get home on second down and get to Case Keenum and allow him or make him throw up a duck like you saw in the Minnesota and New Orleans game last week that was easily picked off by the Saints defense. That's the way you beat Case Keenum, is by getting pressure on him on second down and forcing the Vikings into third and long. And like I said, the Eagles do a great job of forcing teams into third and long. 3rd and 8's the average on third down for the Eagles defense this season. It's just something to think about. Case Keenum this year, 65% completion percentage, about 14 touchdowns. Shouldn't say about 14 touchdowns. 14 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Those are his numbers on the road. So 5 of his 7 interceptions have come away from the friendly confines of that Minnesota Dome, where everything is kosher. Everything is fine. It's beautiful out here. It could be negative 14 outside in Minnesota, but they've got the roof. They've got turf. Stephon Diggs is fast on turf. Case Keenum's not going to slip on turf. The fans are louder because everything's held in. But on the road, it's a different game. It's a different game on the road when you come to a city like Philadelphia for the right to go to the Super Bowl. You remember how loud it was last week when the Eagles and Falcons played? Ramp that up about 2 times. That's what it's going to be come Sunday at 6:40 when the game kicks off. And I have the same mentality as I did last week. The Eagles lost the toss last week, and they got the football. I wanted the Eagles to take the football. And I'll tell you why I wanted the Eagles to take the football. When you have an offense that can be stagnant at times, go out and try to prove something. Go out and take the football especially against a good defense like the Minnesota Vikings. Take the football and march. Put together a drive and show the Vikings that Nick Foles can lead the Eagles down the field and put some points on the board. I don't care if it's 3. If you put 3 points on the board on your opening drive, by the way, Eagles one of the best teams in the league this season with putting points on the board on their opening drive. And again, I know it comes on the heels of Carson Wentz and not having number 11 anymore. But the Eagles are one of the best teams in the league at putting points on the board on their opening drive. So go put points on the board. Like I said, if it's 3, you get 3 points on an opening drive. You can silence that Minnesota defense a little bit, and then your defense comes on the field when your fans get loud. And you get that burst of energy with the fans behind you and your good unit on the field. Your better unit on the field. The team that held the Atlanta Falcons to 10 points. A team who primarily consisted of backups held the Dallas Cowboys starters to 2 field goals. Or 6 points, I should say. That's my theory. I'm taking the ball. I want the ball, and I want to punch the Minnesota Vikings in the face before they even get a chance to put their offense on the field, before they get a chance to put their playmakers in Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs on the football field. Because then you put your team in that 3rd and long, and the Eagles give up 3.4 yards per play on 3rd and long and get off the field. Then you've got 3 points, a defensive stop, and the football back. Why not? Why not take the ball? And if it blows up in your face and the Vikings stop you and they score and they get the ball at halftime, you're going to have to make adjustments. But why not try to take a shot at the Minnesota Vikings defense, who, by the way, are susceptible on the road? 7 of their 10 rushing touchdowns allowed on the road. They give up 1.5 yards more per carry on the road. Quarterback play's not been great, but that's a product of the fact that Trey Waynes and Xavier Rhodes are playing quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings, and they got a good pass rush. Quarterback play against the Vikings hasn't been great all season. But just like many people in Minnesota are saying, the Eagles haven't played anybody. The Eagles have a 4th-place schedule. They got the Bears. They played the they had to go play the Broncos at home. They got the 49ers. What's the difference? What's the difference at home or on the road? Does it really matter to you? Because I'll put it this way. The Vikings got the Bears twice. They got the Packers twice, including a 1.5 games without Aaron Rodgers because they broke his collarbone. So what's the difference between the Vikings getting a 1.5 games of the Packers without Aaron Rodgers and the Bears twice, or the Eagles playing the 49ers and the Bears? I don't see one. But anyway, getting back to the Vikings defense on the road, it's going to come down to the Eagles getting outside the tackles. Whether they're running the ball outside, taking the ball outside on traps and counters, or they're going to the slot area, which, by the way, the Vikings are susceptible to issues if Nelson Aguilar can get out in the slot and Zach Ertz can get out in the slot. But go back to that Atlanta game and pinpoint the play for me where you thought the Eagles can run the ball against anybody. Because I bet you've got that play in your head. And that play is Stefan Wisniewski throwing 2 guys to the ground while blocking for Jay Ajayi. That play might be the Eagles bursting up the gap. Jay Ajayi on the 2nd play of the game, getting up the middle, prior to fumbling the football, of course, and gashing the Falcons for 10, 11 yards. run on the Vikings defense, get to the outside, allow your athletic guards to pull, and create some open space. Use your tight ends, allow your athletic guards to pull, run the football, and shorten the game. Because listen, this isn't college football. You don't have to put style points up to get a better ranking in the standings. You don't have to beat North Texas, who, by the way, is pretty good this year, so I shouldn't use North Texas. You don't have to beat Old Dominion by 40 in order to look good in the college football playoff rankings. You just have to beat the Minnesota Vikings by a single point. And I don't care if it's 3-2, 3-0, 6-3, 10-7, whatever kind of combination of scores that you want or that you think it might be, and like I said, a lot of people have predicted that it's going to be a low-scoring game. Whatever kind of combination of numbers that you put together that has one number larger than the other and the Eagles sitting at that larger side than the smaller side, I'm cool with. I don't care how you get it done. I don't care if it's a defensive score. Jake Elliott, 55-yard field goal to win the game. Nick Foles throws one pass all day and it's a touchdown. You run the ball 75 times. I don't care how you get it done. Just get it done. And as we go to our next break and our final break, let me give you my prediction for this game. I took the Philadelphia Eagles to win 7 games this season. I figured they might win 9 with the way their schedule looks. I don't think I was able to take into consideration that the Broncos weren't very good, that the Raiders weren't very good, that they were going to beat Carolina on the road, that the Giants would win no games this year, very few games this season. So I had them winning somewhere between 7 and 9 games. And I think a lot of Philadelphians, at least your knowledgeable fans, had them somewhere between 7 and 10. And 10 would have been an unbelievable step forward for both Doug Peterson and Carson Wentz. And the sky was falling after the Kansas City game when they didn't run the football and LeGarrette Blount didn't get a touch. They then went off and rattled 9 in a row, lost to Seattle, finished the season 13-3 without Carson Wentz. This season went above and beyond my expectations. With that being said, you have to temper expectations and change them as things are presented to you. Now, I understand that people are going to go back and say, Tyler, you had them winning 7 games. They won 13. At minimum, they played in the NFC title game. Look how wrong you were. You're right. I was wrong. I get it. It happens. If I was right on everything, I would go play the lottery. You would never hear from me again, and I would move to an island by myself, and nobody would ever talk to me again. And I'd swim with fishes for the rest of my life because I was a millionaire. But that's not the case. That's the beauty of sports, is we can change our thought process on things. And as the Eagles march towards the end of the season, and they won 13 games in the regular season, even without Carson Wentz. I said last week they were going to win the game. I didn't know by how much. I think my final prediction may have been 23-17. I think I took the Eagles to win. They won by 5. It wasn't nearly as high scoring, but they won, and that's all that matters. Like I said last week to a lot of people, and I'm going to say this again, I'm willing this win into existence. I am speaking an Eagles win into existence. And if I say it enough times, it's going to happen. Therefore, the Eagles win and go to Minneapolis in 2 weeks to go play for the Super Bowl. Whether it's the New England Patriots or the Jacksonville Jaguars, I do not care, because the Eagles are going to the Super Bowl. Final score in this one: the Eagles 17. The Vikings 14. Another close game. I'll take the Eagles. We'll see you in Minneapolis. Take a short break. On the other side, we'll switch gears, talk some Sixers basketball as we reach the halfway point. And the Sixers are 21-20 with 41 games left to play. Can they make the playoffs? When does Markelle Fultz come back? And does Ben Simmons deserve to be an all-star in his rookie season? All that and much more right here on the No Name Podcast for Philly Sports Network. All right, Philly, let's switch gears a little bit for the final segment and talk some Sixers hoops for about 10 minutes or so, and then we'll wrap things up here on the very first edition of the No Name Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Zulli, exclusively on Philly Sports Network. Thanks so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed our first two segments about the Philadelphia Eagles and their their chances to go to the Super Bowl against the Minnesota Vikings this coming Sunday. But let's flip gears, get to the hardwood, and talk some hoops as the Philadelphia 76ers have officially hit the official midway point. I know people always like to talk about the unofficial midway point being the All-Star game, but officially 41 games down, 41 games to go for the Philadelphia 76ers, and they sit at 21-20. This is a team who a few years back won 9 games. It's a team that last year won 28. So for them to not reach the 30-win plateau, they'd have to go 8-33. Barring any catastrophic injuries to either Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid, that's not going to happen. If they go 21-20 in the second half of the regular season, that puts them at 42-40. And over the last few years, 42 has been far good enough to get into the playoffs. Last year, I know it was slim. It was much slimmer deficit to get into the playoffs with 42 wins because the last two teams had 41 each. And one of them was the Chicago Bulls, who are not going to make the playoffs this year. So 42 wins should get you into the playoffs. It may be an 8 seed, and you may be staring at the Boston Celtics for a 7-game series. But right now, that's okay because it's process. I will not dive into trust the process because I hated the idea. Absolutely hated the idea of sucking for 5 years just to get a couple of good players. But you know what? The product has worked. Enough, at least for now. We'll see if they can continue to transcend and get better as the years progress. But right now, 42-40 would be a stunning accomplishment for a team that won 9 games a few years ago. To jump from 28 to 42 is a massive leap. And by those standards, if you can go another 14, you're going to go from 28 wins to 42 wins to 56 wins and be a 2 or a 3 seed in the Eastern Conference. But we'll slow things down for a little bit, talk about just 2018 as it's kind of played itself into fruition. Joel Embiid named an All-Star starter, an All-Star game starter. He becomes the first Philadelphia 76er to be named a starter since Allen Iverson back in 2003. That's kind of unimaginable to me. The fact that Allen Iverson is the last starter for the Sixers, who were never world beaters after AI left, but were consistent playoff teams. The fact that the Sixers have not had an All-Star game starter in 15 years is unbelievable. JoJo's averaging about 24 points a game, 11 rebounds, 2 blocks, almost 4 assists. In 31 minutes, mind you. So he's doing all that in limited time. There have been games where he's played far less. There's been games where he's played almost 48. But Joel Embiid being on the court, even if it's not for 82 games, which it won't be because he sat out games, even if it's for 60 games, you're getting an unbelievable talent at the center position. Pair him with Ben Simmons. Pair him with a healthy J.J. Redick when he comes back from his partially broken bone, which should be healed in about 2 to 3 weeks. Get Markelle Fultz on the floor. At some point in the next calendar year, get Markelle Fultz on the floor. Because if I were a betting man, I would tell you that Markelle Fultz isn't playing in 2018. Based on the history of the Sixers medical staff, he's not going to play, and there's no reason for him to play. They'll win 42 games with or without him. They might win 45 or 46 with him, but they're not going to lose any more than 40 without him. But what I really need to come to terms with is that the Philadelphia 76ers are not quite ready just yet. And you know exactly what I mean when I say they're not quite ready just yet. Because they are an infuriatingly frustrating team to watch night in and night out because they'll put 30 unbelievable minutes on the court, whereas you saw last night, 30 good minutes was enough to beat a Kyrie-less Boston Celtics, and it was enough to beat the Toronto Raptors on the road both games. But sometimes it's not. Go back to October. Remember the Houston Rockets game? How'd that one end? Talk about earlier this month. How'd the London game end? They had a 22-point lead against the Celtics. Good teams find a way to win. The Sixers aren't quite good yet. They're not bad anymore either. But they're not ready to be good just yet until they put together a full 48 minutes on the floor. And a good 30 minutes in 2018 is way better than a good 0 minutes in 2015 when Hollis Thompson and Tony Roten and all those guys were roaming the floor and you were getting into the stadium for a box of mac and cheese. They're electric, they're young, they're inexperienced, they're turnover prone, and they're frustrating. They are extremely, extremely frustrating to watch. Because they'll string 5 minutes together where they score 20 points in 5 minutes. Joel Embiid's popping a three, then he's dipping down low and dunking on a guy. TJ McConnell is coming in with the second unit and dropping 8 points in 4 minutes. Which, by the way, he's put up high teen numbers over the last 2 games, including a career high the other day with 18. And then they'll put together 5 minutes where they are the most turnover-laden team in the country. And that's why they turn the ball over 18 times a game. More so than the Lakers, who are right behind them. 2 young teams that are building in similar fashion, but they turn the ball over more than any team in the NBA. But then on the flip side, like I said, you'll get 5 really good minutes in a row where they prove why they're the 7th highest scoring team in the country, averaging nearly 109 points a game. It's mind-boggling to me to see the 2 sides of the coin with this Sixers team. If they put together a full 48 against good teams, and I'm not talking, playing the Kings, who, by the way, have had the Sixers number for some reason this season. I'm not talking about playing the Kings. I'm not talking about playing the Suns. I'm not talking about laying the smack down against the Detroit Pistons. I'm talking about putting 48 good minutes together against the Boston Celtics. 48 good minutes together against the Toronto Raptors. 48 good minutes together, dare I say, against the Golden State Warriors. And the Sixers put together about 25 good minutes against Golden State, and then the Warriors decided, okay, let's go play. We're actually going to put our players in the game and win this game by 30. But when the Sixers finally put together a good 48, there's going to be a good team. It's going to be a good team to watch. They're going to be a lot of fun. They'll be a pace team for sure because they can get up and down and move. And then when they want to change the pace and slow the tempo down, they'll feed the low block to Joel Embiid, who's going to average 25 points a game for the next 5 years before his knees cripple him. Understand that short shelf life for Joel Embiid. If the Sixers can win in the next 5 years, I'll take it. But just as we close out the show, I really want to get to a stat that was really mind-boggling to me when it comes to the Sixers. And that's the fact that the production from the guys that aren't part of the what you would call the top 7, your starting 5 with Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, J.J. Redick, Robert Covington, and whoever you want to throw out there, whether it be Dario or whomever you want to throw out there to be the 5th guy. And then you go to the bench and you've got TJ McConnell and Trevor Booker shows up on occasion. Until Markelle Fultz gets healthy and gets on the court, after those 7 guys, you're running out Jared Bayless. You're running out Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot. You're putting Amir Johnson on the floor. They are not going to keep the Sixers in close games. Now, if you're winning by a lot or losing by a lot, they're fine to have on the court. but they're not going to keep the Sixers in close games and keep those games close. You need an eighth guy, and Markelle Fultz might be your eighth guy. You need a ninth guy. And if you have 9 good players, 9 guys that you can confidently put out on the court at any moment and hold firm a lead or keep a deficit where it is until your 5 starters can get back out on the floor, then you're in good shape. But the Sixers are about 2 short of that right now. Do the Sixers make the playoffs this year? Probably. Probably as a 6, 7, 8 seed. The way it comes down to me is there's 3 spots for 4 teams. It's the Sixers, the Knicks, the Pistons, and the Pacers. As now the Magic have fallen off. The team that I thought might make the playoffs, the Charlotte Hornets, have been absolutely abysmal. I think there's 3 spots for 4 teams. You've got a 6, a 7, and an 8 for the Sixers, the Pistons, the Pacers, and the Knicks. Who's going to grab it? Well, it's the teams that play the most fundamentally sound down the stretch and win games that they're supposed to win and then steal a couple. Sixers beat those 3 teams. They've already swept the season series against the Pistons. They could beat those 3 teams, down to 2 teams, the Knicks and the Pacers. Why don't they make the playoffs? I don't see a reason as to why not. Do they go anywhere? 7 games against the Celtics would be a lot. 7 games against the Cavs would be a lot. 7 games against the Raptors would be a lot. But who knows? It's a young team. They're fun to watch. Maybe they could shock the world just as the Sixers did the last time they won a playoff series against the Chicago Bulls. Now, of course, that was without Derrick Rose, who was in his prime at that time. But stranger things have happened over a 7-game series. That'll just about do it for me here today, and thank you so much for joining in. If you enjoyed it, please, please, please go check out all the great content that Philly Sports Network has to offer. I don't want to tout my own horn too much, but we've got a great group of guys who write all across the spectrum and dive into everything from Eagles film room study to Flyers game day breakdowns with credentials with the Flyers. We have an unbelievable cast and crew who do a great job, so check out everything that they have to offer. A thank you to Philly Sports Network for allowing me to write and now contribute this podcast each and every week. As I said, we'll come up with a name. Right now, though, we'll sign off as the No Name Podcast right here on Philly Sports Network. I'm Tyler Zulli. Can't wait to talk to you next week when the Eagles are headed to the Super Bowl and the Sixers improve on their 21-20 record. Have a great week.